I have a problem. I've got about 3 more rooms I want to build in my WoW house before the release of Midnight increases the decor budget limit, but I only have about 300 budget left before I'm capped out. And these rooms are definitely going to be more than 300 budget each. Now I could just settle for one of them, but I think I can have my cake and eat it too. I think there's a way that I can optimize my other builds, improve the layout of my house, and get to make all the rooms that I want to make all at the same time. Hi, I'm Nyx. Welcome back to my WoW housing series, and today that's exactly what we're going to do. I mentioned I wanted to cut back the budget, and I know exactly where we can start, in Vice's room. While I really liked the build I ultimately ended up with here, it still doesn't really feel like Vice, and on top of that, it cost about 400 budget to make. Comparison, this Blood Elven Temple, which I'm really happy with, only took about 300 budget. So we're gonna head into the housing menu here and start off really simply. I'm gonna say one final farewell to this scripted build with all its little knickknacks everywhere, and then that room's gonna get deleted. Already, we saved about a good 450 budget off doing that alone. Of course, we're going to get some of that back as we rebuild the room today. I think that what actually fits her the best is honestly just going to be a simple hallway room. There's still a ton of space to work with in a hallway, but it also keeps that level of crampedness that I feel fits Vice. And with our general theme that we've got going on of this being a fourth wall mine that has since been bought and converted, I can easily make this into a mine shaft of sorts. So the first thing that's going to happen now that we've got our basic layout in is I'm going to rebuild Vice's room from the ground up. There won't be a huge amount of crazy changes because a lot of her aesthetics are staying the same, but in this cramped space, I'm going to emphasize that a lot more and really make something that I feel truly fits her. So I've reworked Vice's room here. Instead of a cave, we've gone with an abandoned mineshaft concept. So we've got these collapsed beams and cobweb that you have to enter through. Then you immediately see this trail of blood, this sort of creepy art made of bones and sticks and old pelts that she likes to make, greeting you and also sort of warding you off as you enter. Beams set up to sort of make it feel like this mine's been collapsed, and then she clawed her way into it. I actually used the waning wood fence, which is one decor, but has this great, like, old wood look to it to get even more of that experience. Then you have to sort of squeeze your way in there. You can't just walk right through super easily. You have to kind of wiggle around a little bit, and it takes you back to Vice's little sanctuary back here. The idea I have for this was an old miner's office. That's why we have like this table in and then this raised platform. Vice has converted this platform to a training area, of course, kept that Turalian portrait with an axe in it because she does not like her paladins. We've got some monk weaponry as well, a nice little platform for her to train and then also potentially do combat RP on. A pile with more bones, more heads, more stuff to make her art. Of course, more blood underneath it. Banner for her queen, chimes from the ceiling like before, but less because for whatever reason, these pretty low polygon chimes are 5 decor budget each. Then this table is great because it's got all this clutter on it that really fits the theme, the skull especially. The knife into a wanted poster could very much be a knife into a sort of picture of Marcy for Vice wanting to hunt her. But all of this clutter is baked into this table, so you get a ton of random objects, which works great for Vice, but you also only have to do 5 decor budget. And then of course her room, which hasn't changed a whole lot, although I think it looks a lot better to have this sort of tent makeshift strung up into the back of this abandoned mineshaft here versus the old one where it was just sort of hanging there from the roof, kind of in the middle of the cave. It fits a lot better, and because it's lower to the ground, you can't really see so much out the back of it. it feels more cozy and more cramped because Vice does like those tight, cramped spaces. This sort of crawl space is exactly what I had in mind when I was thinking what sort of room Vice might live in. But not much has changed. We've used kobold treasure piles to make clutter and then put a bunch of random objects across, of course, the Dark Heart and the Eye of N'Zoth, which generates whispers and also relatively well fits the theme, but also these two kind of show off that I have completed those meta achievements. And a pile of pillows for her to sleep on, but she's not a typical bed sort of girl. The book by Archdeaconess Letitia Walsingham, once again, that she studies the shadow from, unicorn that I've clipped into the wall, and a nice pretty light hanging from above. The only light really in this whole place. Purple, of course, since that's her favorite color, and I feel like it's a good spot for it in the back there. This area has come together a lot better than the cave. I feel a lot more confident in this as a space for Vice and a space to roleplay her in. And on the upside, it also saved a ton of budget. I think it knocked off a good about 300 or so budget, which lets me have about 600 budget total left to spend on the rest of the house. With 3 rooms, that's 200 each. Now that's still not ideal, because with the walls and the flooring we'll have to put in, that's going to knock out a chunk, but it's a lot more manageable. I'm going to shift gears and finally make it so that my guildies can at least have a flow through from the start of the house to this room, up the stairs, and then around into the Forsaken area that we'll be using the most, because that is something that's a little awkward for roleplay, is dealing with the fact that there's just an unfinished room along the way. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to make some nice hallways, and the matron's office, the owner of this whole establishment, especially since I have roleplay planned for her in the future, is going to get built right here. But before that, I want to take another crack at these shelves. If we can find a way to lessen the decor cost on these while improving how they actually look, then that will be all the better. I think this looks really nice, and it saved us like 30 budget, which is obviously a huge benefit. You can still get back here to this part, and actually it works even better having the bookcase more concealed by the cabinets themselves, because, like I mentioned in the last episode, you tend to focus on points that are brighter. This is now dark and it's partially concealed, so you're not really seeing it. It's just sort of blending into the background compared to these two cabinets, which further hides this hidden entrance to my apothecary's lair. That's a nice easy improvement there. I also increased those barrel sizes. Just dropped a few bits of extraneous decor that weren't really adding a whole lot to the overall feel or like providing a lot of detail, but were adding to the decor budget. Or things, now that we're getting into this stage where I have to worry about budget, that I'm going to be doing more of. Let's return to this room now and focus our eyes forwards, as we've got some hallways, and then within those hallways, the office of the matron to build. Neat little trick I just found. Because these walls don't normally reach the ceiling, leaves this awkward gap, but if you use your hotkeys to scale up your decor, even these walls, which normally can't be scaled, as you can see, can actually be scaled up. So I'll be able to have them reach the roof and probably also save on a couple wall pieces here if I'm lucky. Okay, nice and simple structural work done. I already put in some minor details in the hallways. They're probably not going to be super detailed. Again, budget, and they are just a transitionary space. But this will be the entrance to the Horde area. As you can see, for now I've got it walled off, just like classic Blizzard devs, putting a fence up to show it's a work in progress. I also put these braziers down in this marker. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for what's supposed to be a sort of like shady, speakeasy type thing to have it this clearly delineated. But this is the sort of thing that you would see Blizzard map designers do to denote, hey, this is the Horde area, and if we come on over to the other side, this is the Forsaken area. So I did it because it feels like something that Blizzard themselves would do, which I think is fun for adding some verisimilitude to a WoW housing build. The matron's actual office herself just so far. Little raised lips so that when she's sitting on her desk that will be here, she is looking down on anyone who just so happens to be meeting with her. And then these back rooms are going to be real simple bedroom, bathroom type setup. Most of the planning and important office stuff happens in the actual office itself, but I do want my characters to have places to stay within the actual house. I have discovered why they don't allow walls to scale. It's because they don't scale their collision either. But it means they meet the roof, and it also means that I saved on some decor budget because I got to ignore 2 entire wall elements, instead letting me feel pretty guilt-free about adding it to the floor here. That's the framework of the build so far. I'm going to go ahead and get started on filling in all the details here, starting with a nice fancy back window here, and then I'll come back to you when all of it's filled up. Quick check-in here. We've only got a few details in, but it's already really starting to liven up the place. This back window, I think, frames the desk really nicely, and of course, again, I have used the trick with the Librum from the Paladin Order Hall to get this great light shaft shining through and further sort of halo the matron when she is sitting in the chair here. Then an area to receive guests. There's going to be more details here and more seats, of course. And then I think I'm going to keep this. I'm going back and forth on it. The idea of this is a sort of murder board type thing where there are maps and markings and all that sort of laid out. There's not really any good way to do that currently. I know there's a Gilneas map, but that's about the closest thing we have to a map for the wall. And it doesn't get that sort of cluttered look I want, so as odd as it is to have stuff like this lantern hanging out, I think that this works. But I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to get some stuff in these side rooms, and hopefully I'll be talking to you again when we're done. We wrap up building here. I wanted to talk real quick about the matron, because I've referenced her in a lot of my videos, but I haven't actually talked about what her deal is. Her history prior to the time in the row is somewhat shrouded in mystery. She's a noblewoman in Silvermoon by the name of Lady Serenrai Lasari. Though she wasn't always a noble, that came recently when she helped with the rebuilding efforts following the Scourge's invasion of Quothalas. But the way she actually makes most of her gold is as a crime lord in Murder Row, capitalizing on the sort of suffering there to continue growing her operation in magical item trading, illicit substance smuggling, assassination, all that fun stuff. She does also provide a home and sanctuary and a safe part of the row for the people under her care, but that comes with the strings that if they try to leave her care, she might not smile upon that too fondly if they're doing it in a way that is a threat to her. She's cunning, charming, knows a silver tongue is as powerful as any blade or spell, and she's ever looking for new opportunities, of which the chaos that will come to Silvermoon and Midnight is sure to present many. As for what she's doing, building a home out in Razorwind Shores, she's expanding businesses. She already has a lot of clients for both the Horde and the Forsaken, and it's easier to make certain dealings when you're a bit closer to Orgrimmar than all the way off in Silvermoon. And after chipping away at this for a bit, we are done and ready for a final walkthrough. I'm really happy with how this came together. It fits this sort of energy I was going for of this very elegant, fancy, but also a little shady office extremely well. On the right here, we've immediately got our sort of murder, war planning board for, territory and stuff like that. But I switched it to the board from the Warrior Order Hall because it just generally fits the rest of the energy on this place a lot better, and it also looks a lot nicer and makes a lot more sense if you don't have a floating lantern and stuff like that. This whole desk is just a place for, further planning but also enchanting. The matron does know how to make magical items, and so I put this rod down here and a bunch of tomes, for crushing up gems. And then over here is a place to take guests. Of course, more trinkets around to sort of show her wealth and her years of collection. We've got actually an interactive one right here from the Mage Order Hall that I really like. I could see it playing as a sort of like puzzle box or something like that. It just provides a cool bit of atmosphere and interactivity. And this table seating setup is pretty simple, but I think that there's a certain power dynamic on display here, having this big plush couch she can sit on, and then really basic stools for the people she's meeting. And then the desk, similarly cluttered as that desk over there, but a bit more like focused on, work, floating book from the Mage Order Hall. She can actually sit in it, and I really like how the big lights behind her frame her, and you've got these beams shining in. I see this sort of look all the time with characters in various shows and anime where they've got these huge windows behind them and this light that sort of frames them at the end of this long office, and it makes for a really intimidating look. And then to further add to the fact that, she's smart, well appointed, and also a mage, I use these bookshelves, which are both, hidden wall bookshelves, but they have the benefits of hiding away her sort of nicely appointed bathroom here. I really hope we get that elven bathtub soon. I think that would be really nice and probably fit the theme of this place. But just something simple. I don't have a whole lot of space to work with. Over here, we've got similarly a bedroom. Again, really simple, just a dresser, a mirror, that sort of stuff. Working with what limited space we have, but I think it makes for a nice area. I did consider making one of these back rooms more of like a shady interrogation place. She's a crime lord. If there's someone that she needs to persuade, it might be a good idea to have somewhere that would be a room to do that. But at the same time, I feel like that's what, the shady Forsaken areas are for what the Horde areas are for. This section is a little bit more restricted than the front, but at the end of the day, she's still trying to portray this look of a legitimate businesswoman, and so having her office also having those places right branching off doesn't really fit that super well. And the best part of all of this is it came in at quite the low budget. I think I only used about 200, maybe under 200, including the walls I put in to build this place. And it leaves us with about 275 budget each for the remaining 2 rooms. I'm sure I can find some more elsewhere. I know my apothecary's room's going to take a bit more budget, so we might need to plan out some more stuff there. And that just leaves this final room, which is currently completely empty. We're going to have the apothecary's room on the bottom floor, the Death Knight's room on the top floor, and I think I'm going to go with the Death Knight's room next, because I've been having a lot of inspiration, a lot of ideas for it lately. I have the same for the apothecary's space, but I still need to figure out a few more things before I get to that. For now, I've been Nyx. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time.